The speed of physics, why communication must shatter bureaucracy. We have a problem. Most of you don't realize it, but most companies, from the moment they are founded, are on a slow, inevitable path to death. They aren't killed by competitors. They commit suicide piece by piece through an autoimmune disease called process. People obsess over competitors. They look at market share presentations. They worry about what company X or company Y is doing. I don't think about competitors. I think about physics. And the greatest enemy of physics, the biggest obstacle standing in our way of achieving the seemingly impossible, is unnecessary complexity. In human organizations, that unnecessary complexity has a name: bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is entropy. It is the universe's natural resistance to organized effort. It is the accumulation of rules, layers, meetings, and procedures created by people who are more focused on protecting their turf than advancing the mission. It is what turns a fast, agile startup like a cheetah into a lumbering, small-brained dinosaur that can't turn and is just waiting for a meteor. This talk is not about productivity tips or nice corporate culture. It is about our operating system. It is about the fundamental principles we must adhere to if we want to survive. It is not an option. It is a prerequisite. You must understand this. Speed is the ultimate currency. Not dollars, not headcount. Speed. Speed of innovation, speed of production, speed of problem solving. And the speed of an organization cannot exceed the speed of its communication. The correlation is 1-to-1. If your communication is slow, your engineering will be slow, your production will be slow, and you will die. You will either be buried by competitors who are willing to move faster, or you will simply collapse under the weight of your own inefficiency before you even get a product to market. So we are going to dissect this disease. We are going to identify its symptoms, the meetings, the jargon, the chain of command, and we are going to kill them using an operating system based on logic and physics. The enemy is entropy. Bureaucracy doesn't just happen. It is built. It is built by well-meaning managers who believe their role is to control information. They create structures to manage the flow, but all they do is build dams. And as I said, entropy always wins. Those structures always trend toward becoming more complex, slower, and dumber. Our enemy is organized stagnation. Here are its key manifestations. The pathology of the chain of command. A few years ago, I sent an email to all Tesla employees titled "Communication Within Tesla." I am going to say again what I said then, because it is fundamental to everything else. There are two schools of thought about how information should flow within companies. By far the most common way is the chain of command. This means you must always communicate through your manager. If you need to talk to someone in another department, you are not allowed. You must tell your boss, who tells their boss, and so on up the chain until the information reaches someone senior enough to officially talk to an equivalent senior manager in the other department. Then the information must flow all the way back down the same path. I have said this before, and I will say it again. This approach is incredibly dumb. The problem with the chain of command is that it is not designed to solve problems quickly. It is designed to enhance the power of the manager. In a bureaucratic system, an individual's power is proportional to the number of people who report to them and how much they control the flow of information. Being a gatekeeper makes them feel secure and important. So instead of a problem being solved quickly where an engineer in Department A notices a bug in Department B's code, walks 10 meters to that engineer and says, "Hey, I think there's a problem here. We get a disaster. Engineer A is forced to tell his manager. That manager, who may not be technical, schedules a meeting to discuss. That manager then tells his director, who tells a VP in their weekly review meeting. That VP then talks to the VP of Department B. The information is now distorted, like a game of telephone. The VP of Department B then funnels the info down to their director, who funnels it to a manager, who finally tells the engineer who wrote the code. Hey, the VP says that the other VP heard from a director that some engineer thinks there might be a problem with your work." By that point, we have wasted weeks. Thousands of cars may have shipped with a bug, and engineer B, instead of getting direct, helpful, technical feedback, gets a distorted political directive from on high that makes them feel attacked and defensive. super dumb things will happen. The system creates silos and encourages departments to erect barriers between themselves. It creates an us versus them mentality, where one department's success is seen as relative to other departments rather than as the collective success of the company. How does that help Tesla? How does that get us to Mars? We are not a collection of feudal fiefdoms. We are a single team on the same ship. So here is the directive. It is not a suggestion. Anyone at Tesla, SpaceX, X, or any of my companies can and should email, text, call, or talk directly to anyone else in the company if they think it is the fastest way to solve a problem for the benefit of the whole company. You do not need your manager's permission. You can talk to your manager's manager without their permission. You can talk directly to a VP in another department. You can talk to me. You can and should talk to whomever you need to make the right thing happen. Furthermore, you should consider yourself obligated to do so until the problem is solved. The point here is not random chit-chat. The point is to ensure we execute ultra-fast and well. And here's the consequence. I want this to be clear so there's no confusion. Any manager who allows this chain of command behavior to happen, let alone encourages it, will soon find themselves working at another company. No kidding. Managers must work hard to ensure they are not creating silos that impede communication. If they cannot do that, they are failing at their job and they will be fired. The tool of bureaucracy. Meetings are the blight. The second primary tool of bureaucracy, the most visible manifestation of wasted time, is the meeting. Excessive meetings are the blight of big companies and almost always get worse over time. They are where real work goes to die. They are where people gather to talk about the work they will do instead of doing the work. I've laid out a set of productivity rules. They are mostly about eliminating meetings. Rule 1, nix big meetings. Get out of all large meetings immediately. A meeting with a large audience is almost certainly not providing value to everyone. It's just a performance. It prevents real debate. People become guarded rather than open. If you are absolutely certain a large meeting is necessary to provide value to the entire audience, for example, an emergency all hands, then keep it very, very short. Rule 2, ditch frequent meetings too. Get rid of frequent recurring meetings unless you are dealing with an extremely urgent matter. Most companies fall into this trap. They set a weekly sync meeting and it just stays on the calendar forever, even when there's nothing left to sync. It becomes a pointless ritual. Meeting frequency should drop rapidly once the urgent matter is resolved. When the problem is no longer urgent, cancel the meeting. You can solve most problems without a meeting. Send a text, send an email, discuss on a Slack or Discord channel. Asynchronous communication allows people to process information and respond when they're ready, instead of interrupting their work. Rule 3, leave. This is the most important rule. This is the leverage. Anyone can call a meeting. It's the easiest bureaucratic action. It's how a lazy manager does work without doing anything. They summon people, waste tens, even hundreds of man-hours, just so they can preside over something. Their power is in their ability to hold you captive in that room. My leave rule reverses the power dynamic. It gives the power back to the engineer, the creator, the mechanic. Your time is the company's most valuable asset. So here is the rule. Walk out of a meeting or drop off a call as soon as it is obvious you aren't adding value. I want you to burn this into your mind. Society has trained you that leaving is rude, that you must sit there passively and wait for the host to graciously dismiss you. That is a social manipulation designed to maintain the bureaucratic power structure. I'll tell you what's rude. It is not rude to leave. It is rude to make someone stay and waste their time. It's theft. You are stealing the company's time and slowing our progress to Mars. So if you are in a meeting and you realize you are not contributing, you are not providing information, you are not making a decision, and you are not learning anything critical, get up and leave. You don't have to say anything, just go. Or if you're on a call, hang up. This applies to everyone. It especially applies if I'm in the meeting and I'm talking nonsense. If I am wasting your time, leave. This system is self-correcting. People will quickly stop inviting unnecessary people to meetings, and people will stop holding worthless meetings entirely. Acronyms seriously suck. The third tool of bureaucracy is language, specifically jargon and acronyms. Years ago, at SpaceX, I sent an email titled, "Acronyms seriously suck." This problem persists, and it is one of my biggest pet peeves. There is a creeping tendency to use made-up acronyms at SpaceX and Tesla. Excessive use of made-up acronyms is a significant impediment to communication. This is not a small problem. Keeping communication good as we grow is incredibly important. Jargon and acronyms are the enemy of good communication. They are barriers. Why? Because they are a tool of exclusion. They create an in-group and an out-group, a priesthood that knows the secret language and the rest of the unwashed masses. No one can actually remember all these acronyms, especially when we have thousands of people making them up. And people don't want to seem dumb in a meeting, so they just sit there in ignorance. They nod their heads, pretending to understand, and then mistakes happen because the communication failed. This is particularly tough on new employees. They arrive and are hit with an alphabet soup. They have to memorize a giant glossary just to function. This slows down their integration and prevents them from contributing immediately. It is a terrible waste of talent, and often these acronyms aren't even efficient. They violate basic logic. The example I gave at SpaceX was HTS's horizontal test stand and VTS's vertical test stand. These are particularly dumb as they contain unnecessary words. A stand at our test site is obviously a test stand. You don't need to say test. But the dumbness goes further. Someone had named one of the test stands tripod. Someone else called it VTS3. VTS3 is 4 syllables. Tripod is 2 syllables. So the bloody acronym version actually takes longer to say than the name. This is insane. It is pure illogic. So here is the rule. Do not use acronyms or nonsense words. Use plain, clear, precise English. At SpaceX, I insist on calling the liquid oxygen tank the liquid oxygen tank, not the LOX tank. Everyone understands the first. Only a subset understands the second. The key test for an acronym is to ask whether it helps or hurts communication. An acronym that most engineers outside the company know, like GUI, graphical user interface, is fine. But if it's something you made up for an internal process, kill it. My policy at SpaceX was clear: unless an acronym is approved by me, it should not enter the SpaceX glossary. If there is an existing acronym that cannot reasonably be justified, it should be eliminated. This needs to stop immediately, or I will take drastic action. I have given enough warning over the years. Communicate clearly. No jargon. Stupid rules. The final and most dangerous tool of bureaucracy is the rules themselves. Most companies run on rules. They have massive process manuals for everything. The problem is the world changes. Reality is dynamic. Rules are static. A rule that made sense one day becomes completely ridiculous the next when the context shifts. Bureaucracy doesn't know how to handle this. To a bureaucrat, the rule is paramount. Adherence to the process is more important than the outcome. We must operate in the exact opposite way. This is one of my most important productivity rules. Follow logic, not rules. In general, always pick common sense as your guide. If following a company rule is obviously ridiculous in a particular situation to the point where it would make for a great Dilbert cartoon, then the rule should be changed. Do not follow a rule blindly just because it's written down somewhere. If you are on the production line and a rule is stopping you from doing something that is obviously smarter, faster, or safer, then ignore the rule and fix it. The only rules that cannot be broken are the rules set by physics. Our operating principle must be the only rules are the ones dictated by the laws of physics. Everything else is a recommendation. You cannot negotiate with gravity. You cannot have a meeting with the laws of thermodynamics. Physics is the ultimate boss. Everything else, every HR process, every departmental rule, every corporate best practice is just a guideline, a suggestion, and often an outdated one. Think for yourself. Use your common sense. If the rule is stupid, say so. And if no one is listening, email me. Now, let's connect it all. Do you see the pattern? A bureaucratic manager will say, you can't talk to that engineer directly. It violates the rule of the chain of command. They will then schedule a recurring meeting to discuss interdepartmental communication channels. In that meeting, They will use jargon and acronyms like SOP and KPI to confuse you into silence. First principles thinking. The operating system we use, the one that replaces all that bureaucratic nonsense, is based on a fundamental way of thinking. It's what I use to design rockets, cars, and everything else. It's called first principles thinking. Why most companies are wrong. Reasoning by analogy. First, let's understand how 99% of the world operates. They operate by reasoning, by analogy. This means they do things a certain way because other people are doing it that way, or because it's similar to what's been done before. Most of human life is run this way. It's a mental shortcut. It's copying. It's useful sometimes, but when you want to innovate, it's poison. Bureaucracy is reasoning by analogy, institutionalized. A bureaucratic company's process exists only because it existed yesterday. The chain of command exists because the military and old dusty corporations have a chain of command. Weekly meetings exist because, who knows? People have always done it. The classic example for me is rockets. When I first started looking into going to Mars, the first barrier was cost. I went to Russia to try and buy some refurbished intercontinental ballistic missiles. They wanted a huge amount of money, up to $65 million per rocket. Why? Reasoning by analogy says because rockets are expensive. They've always been expensive. The big aerospace contractors charge hundreds of millions. So $65 million is a bargain. If I had accepted that analogy, SpaceX would never exist. I would have concluded it was too expensive and given up. Our method, first principles thinking. Instead, I approached the problem from a physics framework. First principles thinking is a process used by physicists. It is the act of boiling a process down to the fundamental parts that you know are true and building back up from there. You ignore heritage conventions and what everybody knows. You ask yourself, what are the fundamental undeniable truths here? So instead of asking, how much does a rocket cost, I asked, what is a rocket made of? Well, it's made of aerospace-grade aluminum alloys plus some titanium, copper, and carbon fiber. Next question, what is the value of those materials on the commodity market? It turned out the raw material cost of a rocket was about 2% of the typical price the Russians or the big US contractors were quoting. This was a revelation. The 98% difference was the cost of bureaucracy. It was the cost of multi-layered subcontractors, complex processes, endless meetings, and reasoning by analogy. It was the cost of people copying each other's designs and adding their own complexity. The first principles conclusion was obvious. Instead of buying a finished rocket for tens of millions, we should start our own company, buy the raw materials for cheap, and build the rockets ourselves. That is how SpaceX was born, and within a few years, SpaceX had cut the price of launching a rocket by nearly 10x, while still making a profit. We did the same thing with batteries. Everyone said batteries are expensive, $600 per kilowatt hour. That was the analogy. We broke it down. First principles. What are the materials in a battery? Cobalt, nickel, aluminum, lithium. What is their cost on the London Metal Exchange? It turned out the material cost was a fraction of the price. The rest was bureaucracy in the supply chain. So we built a gigafactory to do it ourselves from the raw materials. The core insight, direct communication, is first principles for organizations. Now, here is the most important connection that most people miss. My direct communication policy is not a personal preference or a friendly HR policy. It is the application of first principles thinking to organizational structure. Think about it. 1, bureaucracy is reasoning by analogy. It says information must travel this path from A to B to C, because that is how we always do it. That is the process. 2, direct communication is first principles thinking. It asks, what is the fundamental truth? Engineer Jane has the data on the engine. I need that data. Second fundamental truth, I am standing here. Jane is standing over there. What is the shortest physical path between me and the data? The answer is a straight line. Walk over and talk to Jane. Therefore, the talk to anyone rule is a physics policy. It simply acknowledges that information, like energy in the universe, must follow the path of least resistance to be efficient. Any manager who adds resistance by demanding the information flow through them, by scheduling a meeting, by requiring a form to be filled out, is violating the laws of physics. They are trying to make entropy win. They're acting like a resistor in a circuit, turning useful work into waste heat. In my operating system, we remove unnecessary resistors. Asking a junior engineer to follow the chain of command is the same as asking them to build a rocket from old Russian rockets instead of from aluminum ingots. Both are forms of intellectual laziness that will bankrupt us. To crystallize this core argument, consider the contrast. The algorithm. A 5-step process for killing bureaucracy first principles thinking is not just a philosophy, it is a practical process. Over the years, especially during Model 3 production hell, I developed a 5-step process I call the algorithm. This is how you apply first principles to any engineering or manufacturing process to kill bureaucracy and complexity. It works like this. Step 1, question every requirement. This is the most important step, and it's the one that traditional schooling trains you not to do. Every requirement must be treated as an assumption, not a fact. Each should come with the name of the person who made it, not a department. Why? You should never accept that a requirement came from the legal department or the safety department. You need to know the name of the real person who made that requirement. Once you have the name, you can go to them using direct communication and question it. Here is the link. You cannot do step 1 of the algorithm without the talk to anyone policy. If you are forbidden from talking directly to the lawyer who wrote the requirement, how can you question it? You can't. The bureaucracy protects itself. Requirements from smart people are the most dangerous because people are less likely to question them. Always question, even if the requirement came from me, then make the requirements less dumb. Step 2, delete any part or process you can. The second step is to delete, not optimize, delete. If you do not end up adding back at least 10% of them, then didn't delete enough. The temptation is to keep parts just in case. Don't delete it. Step 3, simplify and optimize. Only after you have questioned and deleted are you allowed to simplify and optimize what is left. A common mistake, and perhaps the most common of smart engineers, is to simplify and optimize a part or a process that should not exist. They have been trained to answer the question, not to ask, is this question dumb? Step 4, accelerate cycle time. Now you can go fast. Every process can be speeded up, but only do this after you have followed the first 3 steps. In the Tesla factory, I mistakenly spent a lot of time accelerating processes that I later realized should have been deleted. Step 5, automate. This is the last step. The big mistake in my factories was that I began by trying to automate every step. We should have waited until all the requirements had been questioned, parts and processes deleted, and the bugs were shaken out. Bureaucracy does the exact opposite. They automate a complex process that shouldn't exist based on a dumb requirement that no one was allowed to question. Our operating system is the algorithm, and the fuel for the algorithm is direct communication. Production hell and the maniacal sense of urgency theory is easy. Practice is hell, literally. Survival requires agility. In my original communication email I wrote, we obviously cannot compete with the big car companies in size, so we must do so with intelligence and agility. This is still true. Agility is the ability to adapt to challenges quickly. This requires a flat structure. A flat structure fosters open communication and rapid decision-making. It allows us to use cross-functional teams to bring experts from different departments together to solve a single problem, dramatically accelerating product development. Now, many outside analysts look at Tesla and get confused. They draw org charts and say, wait, Tesla has a traditional functional structure. There is a hierarchy. They are right, but they have missed the point. We have a functional hierarchical structure for accountability. People need to know who they report to and who is ultimately responsible for a functional area. That is normal. But what the analysts don't see is that we overlay a flat, agile, peer-to-peer communication network on top of that structure. A functional structure tells you who you work for. Our communication structure tells you how to get work done by talking to anyone you need to. Traditional companies make the fatal mistake of merging these two structures. They believe you can only talk to people within your accountability structure. That is the path to bureaucratic death. We separate them. Accountability is vertical. Communication is in every direction, horizontal, diagonal, up, down, whichever path is fastest. Production hell. Nowhere was this operating system more violently tested than in Model 3 production hell in 2017 and 2018. The company was on the verge of death. We had bet everything on scaling up, and the over-automated production system failed catastrophically. The company was burning money at an unbelievable rate. We were weeks from bankruptcy. In that crisis, what do you think happened to bureaucracy? It was incinerated. It could not survive. Why was I sleeping on the factory floor? Why was I working 120-hour weeks? It was not because I don't have a house or because I enjoy suffering. It was because I needed to shorten the feedback loop to zero. In a normal company, the feedback loop is monthly. A problem happens on the line. A report is written. A meeting is scheduled. A month later, an engineer changes a screw design. In production hell, our feedback loop had to be seconds. I wanted to be there on the line so that when a robot failed or a part didn't fit, the production line worker could immediately grab an engineer or me and say, this fucking thing doesn't work, why the fuck did you design it this way? And that engineer could change the CAD design on the spot, and we could try a new part within an hour. That is an instantaneous physical feedback loop. It is the antithesis of bureaucracy. When you are in hell, you do not have time for meetings, you do not have time for the chain of command, you do not have time for stupid acronyms, you only have time for physics. Direct communication becomes the air you breathe, because without it, you suffocate. Production hell was a cleansing fire. It forced you to adhere to first principles, because everything else was too slow. And it forged our 5-step algorithm. I told senior staff their presence had to be physical. That's why I live in the factory, so much so that those on the line could see me working alongside them. If I had not done that, Tesla would long ago have gone bankrupt. The operating principle, a maniacal sense of urgency. This brings us to our core operating principle, the thing that underpins all of this, a maniacal sense of urgency. You must act like we are about to die. Because for most of our history, I still run the companies with the assumption that we are a startup about to run out of money. This is why I demand high intensity. This is why I talk about a hardcore culture. In 2018, I tweeted, there are way easier places to work, but nobody ever changed the world on 40 hours a week. I still believe that. The math is simple. If other people are putting in 40-hour work weeks and you're putting in 100-hour work weeks, then even if you're doing the same thing, you will achieve in 4 months what it takes them a year to achieve. We do not have time to waste. We are trying to revolutionize the auto and energy industries at the same time. We are trying to make humanity a multiplanetary species. We cannot do that on 40 hours A. The intense, demanding culture is not a side effect. It is a filtering mechanism. It's a self-selecting filter. It attracts people who want to build the impossible and repels those who do not. When I took over Twitter, I sent an email titled "A Fork in the Road." It offered an ultimatum. Going forward, to build a breakthrough Twitter 2 and succeed in an increasingly competitive world, we will need to be extremely hardcore. What did this mean? This will mean working long hours at high intensity. Only exceptional performance will constitute a passing grade. I asked people to click yes if they were in. Anyone who has not done so will receive 3 months of severance. Now, people complain about burnout. Working long hours is tiring, no doubt. But do you know what is more burning out than working hard? Failing. It's working hard inside a stupid bureaucratic system where your effort is wasted. It's spending 60 hours a week preparing presentation slides for pointless meetings, writing reports no one reads, and fighting other departments over nonsense. That is what destroys the soul. Our work is exhausting, it is all-consuming, but it matters. We are changing the world. I would rather burn out building something great than burn out navigating a bureaucracy. Resolving the contradiction, freedom to communicate versus consequence. Now, we have to address an apparent contradiction. If I encourage everyone to talk to anyone, why are there cases of employees being fired for speaking up? The media loves to talk about this. They don't understand. They see the SpaceX open letter incident and scream hypocrisy. They are wrong. They haven't read the rules. The SpaceX open letter incident. Here's what happened. A group of employees at SpaceX wrote and circulated an open letter. This letter was not about hardware. It was not about launch schedules. It was not about how to get Starship to orbit. It was about my personal tweets. It said, my public behavior was a frequent source of distraction and embarrassment. Several of these employees were fired. The media and later the National Labor Relations Board claimed they were fired for direct communication and criticizing me. This is completely false. Let's read my rule again. I'll read it slowly so you'll understand. Communication should travel via the shortest path necessary to get the job done, not through the chain of command. Any manager who attempts to enforce will soon find themselves working elsewhere to solve a problem for the benefit of the whole company. And from my original email, the point here is not random chit-chat. Communication to solve versus communication to distract. There is a fundamental difference, a line as clear as day, between communication to solve problems and communication to create distractions. Communication to solve problems. Hey, I'm a junior engineer. I think the grid fin design can be simplified. Here are my calculations. Or my boss is blocking me from talking to avionics. This is slowing down our testing. Result, I love this. This is exactly what the system is designed for. You are helping the mission, communication to create distractions. I don't like the CEO's political tweets or jokes. I'm going to write an open letter, circulate it across the entire company on work time, pressure thousands of my colleagues to pick a side, and create a massive internal fight while we are trying to prep for a launch. Result, you will be fired. Explaining the no asshole policy, this brings us to a critical balancing policy, the no asshole policy. Some might think that a hardcore, flat, direct communication environment where anyone can challenge anyone would create a toxic environment. It is the opposite. In a bureaucracy, you don't need a no asshole policy. Why? Because the rules protect everyone. You never have to confront anyone. You just hide behind the process. Fake politeness reigns while resentment simmers beneath. In our system, we remove those rules. What replaces them? Logic and respect for the mission. Direct communication is not a license to be an asshole. It is a requirement to not be one. What is an asshole in our context? One, it is someone who makes the problem personal instead of focusing on the technical issue. Two, it is someone who hoards information to protect their power. Three, it is someone who puts their department or their career above the good of the company and the mission. Four, and most importantly, it is someone who creates internal distractions, drama, or factionalism instead of focusing on getting the job done. Those employees who wrote the open letter violated the no asshole policy in the most severe way. They took an external, non-technical issue and turned it into an internal divisive weapon, distracting thousands of people on company time. They were fired not because they spoke truth to power, but because they were being assholes to their colleagues and harming the mission. The NLRB lawsuit completely misunderstands the issue. They are trying to apply the rules of a 20th century bureaucratic world to a 21st century mission-driven, high-performance organization. It will not work. We will fight it. Your freedom to communicate exists to serve one purpose, to solve problems so we can achieve our mission. It does not exist so you can hold internal political debates. Do that on your own time. The ultimate vision communication for a multi-planetary future. This brings me to my final point. Why am I obsessed with this? Why care about meetings, acronyms, and communication channels? Why fight bureaucracy as if it's a mortal enemy? Because it is. Bureaucracy is the great filter. People ask me why I'm in such a hurry to get to Mars. Why this maniacal sense of urgency? We live in a fragile window of time. Consciousness, as we know it, is a tiny, flickering candle in the vast darkness of the universe. It exists only on this planet. And this planet's history is a series of extinction events. To ensure the long-term survival of consciousness, we must make humanity a multi-planetary species. We must establish a self-sustaining city on Mars. Now, back to physics. The current cost to get 1 ton of payload to the surface of Mars is about $1 billion. You cannot build a city at that price. To create a self-sustaining civilization on Mars, which I believe is the key threshold, the great filter, we need to improve the cost per ton to surface by at least 1,000-fold, maybe 10,000-fold. We will never, ever get there by operating like a traditional aerospace contractor. Their bureaucracy, with its meetings and chain of command and reasoning by analogy, is the reason the cost is so high in the first place. The real great filter may not be an asteroid or nuclear war. It might be bureaucracy. It might be the social disease that prevents a civilization from innovating fast enough to save itself from existential threats. My war against pointless meetings and stupid acronyms is not about this quarter's performance. It is about ensuring human consciousness has a future. Our system of direct communication, our first principles operating system, is not just a business strategy, it is a tool for survival. AGI, the future of work, and the obsolescence of management. And this applies to the other great frontier, artificial general intelligence. We are building AGI. My dispute with OpenAI, which I helped found, was not about profit. It was about structure and safety. I believed that a non-profit, open source only structure could not compete with focused entities like Google. You need a focused, agile structure to get there. But you must also have safeguards to prevent it from becoming an AGI dictatorship, either by an individual or by a bureaucracy. And when AGI arrives, it will change everything about work. AI and robots will eventually replace most human jobs. There will come a point where no one needs to work. Working will be optional. It will be like a hobby. Like today, you can grow your own vegetables instead of buying them from the store. You do it because you like it, not because you'll starve otherwise. There will be universal high income. In that future, what happens to the corporate structures we've spent 100 years building? What happens to the middle managers? What happens to the bureaucracy? They vanish. The entire complex, multi-layered, hierarchical structure that companies build exists for one reason only: to manage and coordinate large groups of humans performing repetitive tasks. AI and robots will do that. The organizational structure of the future will consist only of mission-oriented, creative problem solvers, engineers, and AI. In that structure, there will be no chain of command. There will be no weekly meetings. There will be no stupid rules. There will only be direct, logic-based communication. What we are doing today at Tesla, at SpaceX, at X-shattering silos, leaving meetings, deleting stupid processes, applying the algorithm, and communicating directly, we are not just building cars and rockets. We are creating a blueprint for the company of the future. We are practicing the operating system that will get us to Mars and beyond. Final call to action. So get back to work. Do not ask for permission to do something that is obviously right. Do not wait for a meeting to make a decision. Do not use a stupid acronym when a plain English word will do. Pick common sense as your guide. Obey the laws of physics. Find the shortest path to the problem. Find the person with the information. Talk to anyone you need to. And just make the right thing happen. Hurry up. We don't have much time.